So it's paying attention to the thoughts of the mind. It's not about not judging, because it's literally impossible. And actually, judging is for our safety. We need to judge.
Depending on how uncomfortable I am, I become less aware of what's happening around me because I'm too hot, I can't focus, I'm hungry, like I got 0 brain cells. Like,
you already have a mindful pathway. It's not like you need to make a new one.
Yeah.
You just have to remember to use it.
Welcome to the Mapuana Reed Show. Today we have Dr. Gaby Toloza with us. She is a psychologist and an expert on mindfulness. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Today we are going to talk about mindfulness. And I think it's something that people, I'm not trying to generalize, but I feel like people aren't always so mindful of others around them. And it's something that maybe I feel like is being lost. Mm-hmm. There's times where here's an example. I'm on an airplane. The airplane lands. Everybody needs to go out one door. And the people in the back, not like maybe there's like 1 or 2 people, they'll just get up and try to like rush it to the front. And I'm like, what in the world? Why? Like, why do you not see everyone else around you? Like, yeah. Let's talk about mindfulness. What is mindfulness to you?
So to me, mindfulness is paying attention on purpose without judgment. And so it's sort of suspending the judgment we have around things. It's not that we're not going to judge. We all judge. It's human to do that. But it's to be aware that you are judging and to suspend that. So you gave the example of getting off of an airplane. So you're kind of talking about the paying attention part. So self-awareness. And we want to have good self-awareness. And in order to do that, we have to be like in the present moment. We have to be paying attention in our body. Like right now, I'm sitting here on a sofa talking to Mapu in this beautiful room. Yeah. So I have to be aware of that. And sometimes it's very easy actually for humans to go into autopilot, and we're actually focused on the future, the next thing. So my guess is those people in the back of the plane, they're really just thinking about getting their bag and getting off the plane. And they're not being particularly aware and attentive to, the 800 people in front of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then that's one really good example. But then I think to myself too, like as I sit there, so like what you said, like without judgment, it's hard sometimes to not be like, what the F are you doing? People sit the hell down. Like, do you not see everybody else around you, But I think that it takes practice. So on both sides, right? So on my side, it'll be like without judgment. And I think that part is hard. Like, you don't know what they're going through. Maybe they're in a rush. Maybe they need to rush to the hospital because there's an emergency with their family member, and they're trying to save time and get there. Yeah. But then when the people are sitting on the airplane, they're looking at them like, what the heck is happening, Yeah.
And then there's a lot that are just sort of even cultural customs, right? So like we lived in Italy, and there's something about when a plane lands in Italy, everyone just gets up. It's just like the Italian way. Yeah. And in lines, everybody rushes to the front, even though there's not really a line, even when they drive cars. Yeah. So there's just sort of customs that our judgment comes in of like, we don't drive that way, or we don't operate that way in a line. It's just our awareness of that, though. So it's paying attention to the thoughts of the mind. It's not about not judging, because it's literally impossible. And actually, judging is for our safety. We need to judge. Judging is that's why you won't run in front of a moving car or touch a hot stove, right? So you need to be able to make judgments, but you need to discern or decide which ones are actually helping you in a situation and which ones are keeping you kind of stuck in that place. Yeah. So it's awareness, though, right? It's really about awareness, and it does require practice. I think that's actually the most important tool, is to learn how to practice mindfulness. And people often think, well, I don't know. People think a lot of different things about like how you practice mindfulness. Some people think it's like something you have to sit on a cushion and meditate every day. That absolutely will lead you down that path. It's like one of the most organized ways to practice, but it is not the only way. Yeah, it's just a mindset in a way.
Give me some other examples of ways to practice mindfulness.
I think the easiest way is really learning to tune into your body. So it's learning like how to connect. We're so disconnected often from our body. So things like, what do I smell? What do I hear? What do I even taste, in your mouth? What do I what am I feeling in my body? Like, not so much an emotion word, but like, am I hot? Am I cold? Am I tense? Am I relaxed? Am I shaky? So all of those things are information your body is always trying to communicate to your brain. And but we have to slow down in order to like connect to that rhythm inside of us. And if we don't slow down, we're too busy in our front of mind, and we're just thinking. Yeah. And thinking is not being. Yeah. So that's the easiest way for me, is to go, what's going on in my body? Yeah. So, oh, I'm hot, or oh, I'm cold, or oh, I'm tired, or I'm hungry, right? And then from there, why that's so important is that exists in the now. So when they say, a lot of people, you ask them what is mindfulness, and they'll say that means being present. Yeah. So your body is always only going to exist in the now. It cannot exist in the past or the future. So that's how the easiest way to ground yourself is just go, what's in my body? Yeah.
So, okay, so sometimes I feel like with me, like depending on how uncomfortable I am. So if I'm hot, like I just can't. Okay. So like if I'm hot or if I'm hungry, those are the two things. Like I feel like I got zero brain cells. My body's like, I'm shutting down. Like, but I do notice that the more uncomfortable I am, the more I tune into my body. Depending on how uncomfortable I am, I become less aware of what's happening around me, because I'm too hot. I can't focus. I'm hungry. Like I got zero brain cells. Like, so then that part, I think I too need to be mindful about what the people around me, is happening, and what's going on.
Well, and like learning how to tune into it sooner, right? So sometimes we wait until we're too hot, or we have the shakes, or we're full on sweating, right? When we actually notice that probably 15 minutes before that, and then learn to have compassion for yourself and take care and take a break and turn on the fan, or get food.
So a good example is, I think it was like a week ago. Was it a week ago? Maybe me and you. We did a podcast interview, me and Sammy. Girl, it was 3:00 and I only had a cup of coffee.
Oh.
And I needed to do a solo episode. And I was like, she was like, all right. She set up everything, and I was just like, I cannot. But I think I needed to take care of myself prior to that. Like, why wait until 3:00? I knew I had a full day. I knew that things were going to happen, and I knew I probably had no time to go out and eat. So then, But
that's an example of you're probably thinking of the future, but you're not aware that that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's not until you sit down and now you have to execute, and then your body's like, whoa, you didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So, but it's setting that practice in your life of like, it literally is so simple, like taking 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes in the middle of the day.
Yes.
People, it doesn't have to be long. It just be like, and what it is like your brain has these pathways, and we have lots of them. You already have a mindful pathway. It's not like you need to make a new one.
Yeah.
You just have to remember to use it. And we live in a world where it's so easy to get caught up in the autopilot of whatever is going on.
Yeah.
So, but if we just make it a practice, then we're not so influenced by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to be honest. When you first said mindfulness, I wasn't thinking of mindfulness for myself. I was thinking of, so like how I gave you the example of mindfulness of the being in the airplane and someone else stands up, and then I'm just like, what the heck's your problem? But that's judgment. But then when you're talking about it, mindfulness of myself, like what do I need?
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to operate the best? I need good sleep. I need food. I need to be mindful for myself, not only mindful for others.
The idea is if everyone was more mindful about themselves, we don't have to worry about other people, because everybody would be worrying about themselves, right? Everyone would take care of themselves, which is not saying that we're not interdependent. We don't need and benefit from community and other people, but there's so many places where we can turn inward. And we really are kind of socialized to turn to other people and even to externalize blame in those places, right? So it's just a pivot. I often think, like, if we could have 10% more mindfulness, what would you take off of other people's plate? What would you put onto your plate that you really like to do for yourself? You know?
I think as women too, it's fast for us to take things off of our plate, and we're so willing to care for others, care for our family, care for our friends, and then we put ourselves last.
Yes.
Yeah. So besides, you talked about like meditation and stuff like that. Give me some other examples of mindfulness. Like what could we do for ourselves? Like, okay, like I know what I need food. I know I need sleep to like be my best. I know I need to care for myself, but are there other practices that you recommend or that you do?
I really recommend slowing down, actually. So like literally slowing down. So imagine if we had like, remote control and I could press slow mo on Mapu's day, like,
Yeah.
and like imagine really paying attention to yourself when you brush your hair or brush your teeth or cooking food, like cutting vegetables, or watching, if you have a child, like watching your child play,
Yeah.
folding clothes, like really like mundane things that take up a lot of our day, really noticing them in a much more fuller, much more richer way.
Yeah.
So that's how we embed mindfulness in our
Yeah.
living practices. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big way.
When someone comes and they work with you, what are some of the things that you're working with them through?
Well, a big thing.
I blessed you.
Aware. Notice what I did.
Mindful. Wait, that was something demure or whatever it's called.
Oh my gosh, I know.
I don't even know what that word means.
To me, demure means kind of, I don't like that they put them together, because sometimes I'm demure if I'm mindful, but to me, demure means like pretentious a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I'm like, well, I don't want to put that together with being mindful. Like,
Yeah.
I like that. I couldn't say that I would be demure when I'm mindful, because it's different every time, right? How I
Right.
am in a
Yeah.
certain state. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's funny. It's my daughter's joke with me all the time, because she'll see it on the social media or whatever. And so
Yeah.
now whenever I'm like, am I very demure? And she'll kind of, she's like, Mom, stop. Don't do that.
She's like, don't use that word.
Yeah. I give a good example that is probably one of my favorite stories, where I feel like mindfulness in action, I guess. And I've been able to recap it now, so I have a good story about it. It was a time my daughter was probably 6 or 7. We were living in Italy at the time, and I was in a mood. Like I don't know, I had a bad day. I was in a mood. I was not my best self at that moment. And I walk in, and my 7-year-old daughter's room is messy. She's 7, and it's not that messy. There's just stuff on the ground, But I come in, and I had already told her, I guess, to clean her room. So I came in, and she's playing, and she's watching her iPad or whatever, and I was like, I kind of raised my voice, and I yelled, and I'm like, I told you to clean your room, and why do you always make me do this? Like, I'm taking out, right? Totally projecting how I feel. And I see her face. She had the face of like, oh, Mom's mad, and like a little
I'm
bit.
in trouble.
I'm in trouble, right? And thankfully, I noticed that face. Yeah, like I noticed it, and I also noticed like I don't want to create that face in her, right? But I was still upset. So I'm noticing like, oh, so I just decided I said a few more words, and then I walk out of the room. And then I come back in a little bit later. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to mend this, but I got to let her know that this is not her. Yeah. So I come in, and then she's like all worried, like she's in trouble, and like she's trying to clean her room because now I said something, And then she looks at me, and I look at her, and I'm like, I don't know what to say. And so I just look at her face, and I go, blah, 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 blah. And then she looks at me, and she's like, la, la, la. And we must have done it like 4 or 5 times, back and forth, and then I was like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry that I raised my voice. And she's like, I'm sorry I didn't clean my room, and then we clean the room together. And now, even she's 13 now, she still will do that. So when we're in a moment that's tense, and I do it too. So we're in a moment that's tense. Neither one knows what to say. And we're not quite sure what to do. We just look at each other, and we'll like, la, la, la. And then we laugh and we giggle,
Yeah.
So it was a place where like mindfulness became like a captured moment, and it's how we dissolve discomfort, right?
Yeah.
And I like it so much because we do it together, and it's silly.
Yeah.
So being silly and being funny, there's a tip on a lot of mindfulness blogs. They'll talk about sing, right? So when you're angry, you're really angry at the guys on the plane, and just start being like, I wish you'd move faster, or I wish you'd sit down, and if you just try to like sing when you're angry, it is very not in agreement with your body, so you kind of can't stay angry, and you kind of giggle, and then you're like, this is not worth being mad about. Yeah, and you let it go.
Yeah. What about, okay, so that's such a great example about your daughter, because I have kids. My daughter does not clean her room either, and sometimes I'm just like, oh, girl, what is the problem here? But is there a balance between like, how do I find this balance? Like, I have 6 kids. I'm on my last 2. The other 4 are out the house already. But finding that balance of being firm, but being mindful, but also, I don't feel like I'm a gentle parent. I feel like I'm a firm parent, and I have some give, but I don't have a lot of give. Like, I don't, because then I feel like it'll just never happen. Like, what's the good balance for a parent to be mindful, but at the same time be firm?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about being both, right? I think it's about being able, the mindfulness kicks in of recognizing when is the time for this and when is the time for that. Like, when is the time for me to be a softer parent, right? And when is the time for me to, like, hold the line?
So picking your battles, like, really,
in a way,
picking your battles. Like, is this really that important? Is her cleaning her room in this moment that important? Okay, that's really good. Or I could tell her, like, hey, I want this room cleaned by this weekend.
Yeah.
So, like, giving her time also, like, okay, mom's giving me a couple of days, like, this weekend this room better be cleaned, or else you're not going to out with your friends, or you're not going to the football game, or whatever it is. Yeah. I
think another kind of going along the lines of, like, the have fun with it is curiosity. So that's probably one of my other favorite words with how I activate mindfulness, is I say I want to be curious, because it's really hard to be judgmental when you're curious, because curious means I want to know, right?
Yeah.
And we think of it as a more playful sensation. So if you can do that to be curious towards yourself, like, ooh, why am I so angry about this, right? Or you can be like, oh, I wonder why she's so resistant. Like, how come she's stuck? Like, I wonder what's going on for her. Yeah. And have I taken a moment to figure out what that is? And, you know, kids are inconsistently open.
Yeah.
So we don't know how much they're going to give or how much, but at least we offer, right? Like, are you okay? What's going on? Is there something going on? What's making it difficult for you to clean your room? You know?
Yeah.
And you're not judgmental. You're just being like, hey, I noticed you're not cleaning your room. So do you want to talk, or, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so what you talked about is being mindful for yourself without judgment also, but, like, figuring that out, like if you are upset at someone, like, digging deeper, like, why does this bother you? Why? You know? Well,
I think you go, so how do you do that? Like, let go of the judgment?
Yeah.
Well, I think at the end of it, it's kind of like the, what do you call it? Like, common humanity, meaning, like, they're just like me and I'm just like them.
Yeah.
So when I'm having this moment and I'm wondering why that other person, maybe not in this moment, but they have had this time happen too. Yeah. In their world with their problems. Yeah. So it's that kind of just a little bit humbling of ourselves, you know, that this is a human experience. You're just being a human.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't know why, and it's okay. It's really hard. As the logical part of your brain wants to know why. It wants to connect the dot. And it's hard to sit. Actually, uncertainty is more difficult than even, like, anger or sadness. Yeah. It's that not knowing. We want that control sensation, right? But the thing is like, we don't really have control of that much.
Yeah.
You know, I have a theory. I should write a book about this, but I have a theory that you can only control 4 things.
Okay.
You can control what you say.
Okay.
And what you do, and what you don't say, and what you don't do. And that's it.
Okay.
So if everybody walked around in the world realizing that that's all they can control.
Yeah.
And what we don't realize is the don't say and don't do is equally powerful to we're so used to say, take action, do. Sometimes just be quiet or say less. Yeah. I know with kids is a big thing. Kids, especially if they're in trouble or, you know, they know they did something wrong already, their verbal language skills are going to go down. That's they're least likely to be open because they're overwhelmed already. So then we berate them with a lecture or talk to them. They already turned us off after, like, sentence number 5. To them, it's the same thing. Right? So just learning to be like, what's the heart of the message I want to deliver?
Yeah.
Like, you did this thing that really upset me. I love you. And let's do better. Right.
Yeah.
And that's enough. That's all they need. They don't need the long, and we're the same way. So our inner critic, right, beats us up, tells us we're not good enough, tells us this or that. Right. And then we have to be like, okay, Pa, already, like, I don't need to keep beating myself up.
Yeah.
You know,
I can let this go.
Yeah.
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 And it's also about picking your battles with yourself.
100%.
Yeah.
More important even, I think.
Yeah.
Because sometimes if you pick the battle with yourself, you're not going to pick it with because you'll be like, oh, I know your kids have their inner critic already too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's I always tell my husband that I'm like, she's already beat herself up.
Yeah.
Like,
Just let
just
her.
let her
Yeah.
go. She already feels bad enough.
She doesn't need more of this.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
Yeah. She just needs to know we love her, and she's gonna work it out herself. Yeah.
You know what was a great example was yesterday. So for those listening, yesterday I did a podcast interview with Brittany, but Melissa was there, and at the end, Melissa had shared, like, she's like, Brittany, I just love how you just like, it's not working out for me.
Yeah.
You know, but sometimes we hold on to stuff and we beat ourselves up over it.
Yeah.
Versus just being like, it didn't work out. Well, moving on.
Yeah. It's actually like so liberating to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I like mindfulness so much, because it exists in the now. It's the only thing that exists in the now all the time. So I can only do what I can do in this moment, right?
Yeah.
And it forces me in a good way to let go.
Yeah.
I don't always remember them, but there's like 8 components of mindfulness, and one of them is letting go. Yeah. And that idea of like, how people always ask, how do you let go? And I'm like, you just decide that it's not that important right now. It doesn't mean that it's never important, you know?
Yeah.
It's just that it's not that important at this moment, and it's not something I can take an action on. I don't have control. It's not one of those 4 things. Yeah. So once you've kind of exhausted those 4 things, you're like, okay, well then I have to surrender to what is here.
Yeah. So normally I start each episode with your job. So I call this your journey on becoming. So take me on your journey.
Condensed version. Nah.
Yeah. Condensed version. 2 minutes, girl.
2 minutes, girl. I think what I'll do is sort of touch on key points. So,
okay.
I'm an only child. To my dad at the time was 20 years older than my mom. My dad's Italian, retired Air Force colonel. My mom was Vietnamese. They met during the war, and he sponsored her out of Vietnam along with the rest of her family. And then I was raised here. So my dad always loved Hawaii. He came through here. And so it's kind of culturally, I have a unique experience in that. Being an only child, like raised by a Vietnamese mom, but also an Italian immigrant dad who was a military man. So it kind of in Hawaii, who they also put me in, like, learned to dance hula, wanted me to be immersed in the culture here. So I always feel like a mixed bag. I never feel like I fit in any box. And I've learned over my lifetime that I'm like a sampler. Like, I like to sample everything, and that's kind of how I operate. Although I hear that in my 50s, I'm probably going to settle and not sample. But anyway, so I had that base, yeah. And then at 17, my dad had cancer. Around 15, my dad had cancer. And then he passed away in my senior year. And when he passed away, and he was retired all my life, so he pretty much took care of me, and took me everywhere and did everything with me. And I think he got to live out what he really wanted to be as a parent. When he had his other kids, he was active in the military, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, right? He was gone. So I had that really like close father-daughter relationship. But interestingly, when my dad passed away, I see this as like the first moment that I became mindful, but I didn't know what it was. I don't know what it was then. Yeah. But my dad was passing away, and we knew that he only had, they said 6 months, but he really only lived another 3 weeks.
Wow.
And so in that time, I knew, and he knew, like my dad knew that it was the time for him. My mom really struggled to sort of accept that. And so she was just having a hard time in general. And so my dad sat me down and he said, it's going to be a hard time. He's like, I'm going to pass away, and you're going to have to take care. He's like, you're going to have to take care of your mom. I'm 17, right? You have to take care of your mom, and you're going to have to take care of you, and you don't sell the house, and like all these little things, because he was just worried, right? And he's like, he told me things like, you never have to, I'm always right there with you. He's like, just close your eyes and think, what would dad do? And dad was here. And it was this moment of like sadness that I knew I was going to lose him, but also his belief in me that I could do this thing, and I felt so present. He's like holding my hand and like rubbing my back, and we weren't crying. I'm crying now, but we weren't crying then. And it was this very like present moment that I remember that, so, and of course it created problems to some degree in my life, because I became this overachiever. Like I can do everything. I have to show, I have to take care, I have to do all these things. So did all the things, went on to get my doctorate. But before that, I had a different experience where I had my boyfriend at the time, Chris, who I was 19 at that time, and he had this rare genetic condition that I didn't know about actually, and it caused him to clot his blood. It was a protein C deficiency, and so his blood would clot, and it would lead to basically he'd have a heart attack, right? Because the clot he'd have to take Coumadin, which would make him a hemophiliac in order to not have this problem. But he was an
avid. And he didn't want to share that with you?
No. I mean, 19, he's 20, right? His dad had the same condition. His dad passed from the same condition in his late 30s. Wow. And I knew the dad had passed, but I didn't know, like, of what, really. Yeah. And it was the same thing. The father wouldn't take the medicine because it really limited their life. They were avid surfers. They were active people. Wow. And so they would bleed out. If they got a cut on the reef, they would, So they made the choice. Like, his dad was active military. He wouldn't have been able to stay in the service with that condition. Mm-hmm. So they just lived, they lived with the risk that they would get a clot. So this was very opposite from my dad's passing, but also a very present moment. Like, all of a sudden he can't breathe one more minute, and he's like, call the ambulance. Yeah. And I'm like, holy shit, what's happening, Yeah. And then we go to the ambulance, and then it's too late, and I don't know what's wrong, so I can't, like, advocate. And then he would have needed open heart surgery basically at that point, right? Yeah. And so then just there, and it's like, he's gone all of a sudden, you know? And there's these, like, moments of, like, okay, and then everyone around you, like, oh, Gabby lost her dad, and then she lost her. I would have married him, so I say my fiance at the time. Yeah. And then his mom, like, takes me on this, like, phenomenal trip, and she just takes me in like a daughter. We're still close to this day. Oh. But again, it made everything felt like it had a magnifying glass on it, right? So, like, she took me. I have these, like, light bulb moments in my life. Wow. And I know earlier I just shared about, like, my daughter, and I make the little face with her. Yeah. And so I feel like I can go back through my life and scan it in this series of all these light bulb moments. There's so many. Yeah. Like, there's so many. And it makes my life feel really long, really long and full. Yeah. And while I have plenty more to do in this world, and I don't plan on going anywhere, if something happened to me, I would die at peace. I've lived a full life. Mm-hmm. At this age, I've lived a full life, and I'm happy about that. Mm-hmm. And I'm crying, but I don't see that as... I see that as part of being a human being. Mm-hmm. And I get to do that while I'm here. I've gotten to experience all these things, And mindfulness is, to me, I didn't learn that till grad school, that had a name, and that's what I'm doing. But then I look around at people in the world, my patients, I look at the patients that have been really successful, and they are mindful people. They figure out how to turn on that light bulb for them, and that's what helps them to heal. And they learn to coexist with their pain. They learn that, because I tell all my patients, like, I don't think you're broken. Yeah. Like, I use a diagnosis because that's how I get a paycheck, but I don't believe you are your label. Yeah. I don't believe that. That's one part of you. Yeah. And that's the deck of cards you got. Just like that's the deck of cards I got in my life. And you have to decide, how do you want to live with that situation? Right? And that means that, sometimes you're going to have really low lows and really hard thoughts and feelings and feel really lonely. And other days you might feel fine. Mm-hmm. So savor all of it, and I find that that's been really the thing that it's created a flexibility in myself. It's not until I became a psychologist that I learned this stuff has words, but I now see it in everybody. I see it in the Oak and Pine girls. I see it, and they all have these things, whatever it is that they're passionate about, whatever it is, doesn't matter. They light up around that thing, and that is those spaces in their life, they are living, really present, and like you held your that retreat we had, and I brought my friend, and I love that idea because relationships are such an important part of our life, and it doesn't have to be plenty, it can be one,
it just needs to be good ones,
ones. And safe ones,
it can be 1, 2, like you don't need like 20 friends that are like, no, you just need a couple and you're good. Yeah.
So it's that idea of like, the mindful places, and then to lean in there again, the non-judgment, right? So with friends, it's the friends that well, they might judge you in a playful way,
Yeah.
in an
Yeah.
honest way. Yeah. They accept you with those quirks or
Yes.
those ways that you are. And
Yeah.
you kind of know they're going to call you out, and they love you still, right?
Yeah. But we do need those friends
We
who call us
do.
out too
Yeah.
sometimes and be like, girl, come on. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that was a very long-winded, and there's always more to that story, but I
Yeah.
became through a lot of powerful mindful moments in my life
Yeah.
that I didn't know that's what it was happening,
Yeah.
and now I work really hard to help other people do the same thing.
Yeah. So what is the difference between mindfulness and self-awareness?
Yeah,
Is
I
there
was
a
thinking,
difference or is it similar?
I feel like they're very similar.
Okay.
I feel like it's just different vocabulary. And
Okay.
I think the key piece that is sticking out to me is the judgment.
Okay.
So I think as long as in self-awareness, you're also being aware of your thinking, like what your thoughts are.
Okay.
Not just like how you're feeling in your body.
Yeah.
Because self-awareness can go pretty deep. You can
Yeah.
be real introspective and
Yeah.
also knowing like how to come out from that, right?
Yeah.
So I think self-awareness, it's the judgment piece that's so important. And again, I emphasize it's not judging. We're gonna judge. It's just knowing how to be like, do I want to use that judgment? Like,
Yeah.
is that helpful to me right now?
Yeah.
Right? Like right now, I start crying, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I'm crying. So the little judging voice comes in like, oh my gosh, you're crying on the podcast. But then I'm like, okay, so because you're a caring person, you're gonna,
Yeah.
what are you not supposed to cry?
Yeah, and because you're remembering your dad
Yeah.
or like, come on, like, yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But it's the ability to do that, right? So
Yeah.
whether you call that mindful or self-aware, either one I think really works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so when people come to work with you, what type of problems are they having or what type of clients do you work with?
Over the years, I've had really, really, really beneficial opportunities. I've gotten to work with such a diverse group of people. I started off working a lot in school systems, in-home programs for kids with autism and other emotional or behavioral
Okay.
challenges. I did that for probably 10 years.
Okay.
Started a nonprofit.
And with the whole family, because
Yeah.
I'm sure the parents need,
Yeah.
some help also. And yeah.
Yeah, it was actually, the system's a little bit different nowadays. It's
Okay.
kind of sad a little bit, but hard to see. Back then, we had the Felix decree in place here in Hawaii, and there was a lot of money available for
Okay.
supporting special ed kids.
Okay.
And that money has been pulled away since
Oh.
then, because supposedly we're all in compliance here now in the state. So the money that was brought in to make sure we did that isn't here. So the schools are held to the responsibility, and to be honest, teachers don't have the time to go into family homes. It's an inappropriate expectation
Yeah.
of them. But at that time, we were allowed to go into the homes. I mean, I helped kids potty train. I helped kids learn how to go to
Wow.
bed at night, how to eat, how to sit in a car, how to use the
Yeah.
bathroom, like everything.
Wow.
And then we went into the school. So we were really like across spaces, and that made teachers really successful too, because we knew how to work with the kid in any environment.
Yeah.
And then that led to me working with kids I made a small nonprofit for a period of time where we wanted to get kids with autism out into the community. And so we would take them surfing, we would take them ride the
Wow.
bus, we'd take them go out Kulo on the boat.
Yeah.
It was pretty crazy. My friend Mariko, which I'll bring to another one of your events, but she, I was like, girl, you want to do that? She's like, okay, we go, let's do it.
Yeah.
I think now I'm sure there was some liability thing that I didn't have, some rule we were breaking, but the joy on the kids and we took our kids camping. Some of the kids never been camping and never slept away from their parents. And they're like, are you sure you're going to take them? And I'm like, let's go. Let's see what happens.
I'm sure the parents too are probably so grateful to have a little break and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got to work with those kids and I still, like, I just had a old client of mine, and now she got like her vet tech certificate, so she can work in a vet clinic, and she works at a supermarket. She takes care of her younger sister who has autism, more severe, so it's really special to live. Hawaii's small like that, so you still run into everybody. And then we moved away. So when I moved away, we were stationed in Oklahoma for a little bit, and then after that to Italy. So once I moved to Italy, my practice became more virtual, and a little bit harder to work with children in a virtual format, especially young kids or kids with special needs. So I pivoted to working with parents, and then I did pivot to all this time I worked with adults, and kind of generalists, so anxiety, trauma, depression, kind of run of the mill that comes into a psychology clinic. And mindfulness became a very useful tool in that time, and I use a type of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. And it basically, the goal of that is to create psychologically flexible people, with the idea being is you don't have a problem, you aren't a problem, like you just need to learn how to be adaptable, and there's all these components of that model. Mindfulness is one of those components, because your ability to be aware of yourself is half our problem, and knowing what you can do in that situation once you're aware of it. So now I work with a lot of couples, a lot of kind of women, I'd say in like their late 20s to 50s. I have like a space of that. And some men that really want to work on mindfulness and becoming more mindful people. Yeah, and then my mindfulness coaching and things like that is a little side offshoot that I'm starting now. Yeah, but I also worked in a prison. I did all kinds of crazy stuff.
I'm sure working in the prison, you're able to like really help, even like for teenagers who who are just kind of like going down the wrong path, or
lots of that. I worked out at YNI Coast Comp for 1 year. I was a resident. I was still a practicum student at the time, but we would go out and do a homeless outreach. And we would go to we'd have this day thing at the comp where the people would come in and we do like triage kind of support for the women. We do a lot of DV screening and things like that we could try to get support and help them leave unsafe situations and stuff. But the kids were always, the boys who a little bit like act like they're tough and they don't want it. And then you bring them in and then they start talking story to you and they tell you things. And then after they leave and they're all like, okay, bye, doc. And then they leave,
It was building that trust, with them and stuff.
They come in, they talk about their family, and then they just leave. And, so it made it normal, a little bit normal for them to, and a lot of them were homeless and didn't have, they're taking care of their 4 or 5 brothers, sisters, and getting them off to school and dealing with addiction in their families. And,
but here's the thing also about being mindful about that situation. So then you have a kid who just kind of comes in all macho and all that, but you don't know his backstory either. You don't know that he's homeless and he's having to take care of his siblings, and his parents are probably just trying to make it, and yet he comes off as just being macho, and and then that's the judgment part also, like on our part, like are we just judging him, but we don't know his story. And I tell patients all the time, I get the benefit of seeing so many people. I've gotten to sit in a chair and listen and create safe spaces for so many different kinds of people. So for me, it's real easy to realize like I'm just like everyone else, and everyone is just like me. We're all going through something. We all have a problem. It looks different content, but the experience is the same. So then it's like, okay, well, I know we're all in this together. But when you don't have that experience and you're isolated and you're not connecting, then you feel very alone and you feel like it's only happening to you. And that's how these young boys would feel sometimes, But then when they got in a group and they're like, oh, look, there's like 6 other guys here waiting too. And then little by little, they form friendships and they realize, oh, we're more the same than we are different. And then that's how the walls come down. And that's kind of what we need to keep doing, that in more and more spaces. So to me, pointing on the mindfulness is the antidote, because if I can help more people and practice it myself and help more people to learn how to do that in their life, we will change the world by doing that. That is so powerful. Yeah, that is so good. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thank
you for sharing all of that. That was so great. I honestly thought I knew we were going to talk about mindfulness, but I did not think of mindfulness as being mindfulness for myself. I was thinking, that's why at the beginning I gave you the example of, you got to be mindful. The people on the airplane, they need to be mindful. But then when you said about the judgment part, I was like, oh, interesting. Yeah. And that's so in the original, sort of in Buddhist traditions where mindfulness emerged from, that was the idea, it's the judging mind. The judging mind is it's our tool. It's the capacity we have as humans, but it's also our downfall. So if we aren't aware of that judging mind, it gets us into a lot of trouble. And we're all guilty of it. So if we're all guilty, we just have to choose better. And it's really powerful when you realize like, oh, I'm judging and I don't really know, but it's not, nothing's wrong with me, because I'm judging. It's just, but that's what also happens. We're like, oh, well, now I'm judgmental. And then now we're stuck on
justifying why we're judgmental.
Yeah. Right. Then it's like this whole loop. We're back in it.
That's where you go, okay, be in the body. I'm breathing. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
here. I'm on the couch,
Right.
that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. So if we were to give maybe like 2 or 3 tips to someone to be more mindful, so someone listening, normally women are listening to my podcast, maybe 2 men probably listen to the podcast. But so I'm just going to say for women. So what are some mindful tips that you could give for maybe 2 examples? One would be for a mom, and then one would be for someone who owns a business, like a small business owner.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I actually think that my tip would be the same for both.
Okay.
And it's a phrase, just pause and notice.
Pause and notice.
Okay. Notice. I like notice because when I say notice something, right? When I say to you, what does notice mean? What would you, rough definition, to notice something?
I think, okay, so pause, like just stop and like basically notice to me would be like tune everything else out and focus on this one thing and notice you, notice this moment, notice Sammy filming, notice that we, yeah. So just pause and focus in onto like right now for me, that would be this room.
Right. Yeah. So take in wherever you are. And like I said earlier, go into your senses. So do I hear anything? Do I smell anything?
Okay.
Do I taste anything? What am I touching? How's my body?
Yeah.
But it's the notice. And why I like the word notice is that it is to me kind of inherently judgment free. We tend not, when I'm noticing, I'm just taking it in. I'm like a sponge. I'm just soaking in like what is here. Next step is judgment. Like that's going to come. But if I notice, I'm less likely, and I'm also more likely to be curious. Yeah. I think the second tip is like have fun in life. We all take life way, way, way too seriously.
Yeah.
Way, way, way too seriously. And yeah, there are serious things and there are emotional things and there are important things to be advocates for. But we don't have to do that 24/7. We actually can't.
Yeah.
And if we learn how to just add a little more fun into life, we actually do that part better. We do the serious part better when we make life light most of the time. So pause and notice and have fun. Yeah. I actually feel like it's an act of rebellion to do that in the modern day. And it's like I'll plug my new business here in a moment, but not new business, but I've made this membership called the Mindful Rebels. And the idea behind that is that it is an act of rebellion to pause and stop and notice your life in this hustle culture that we live in, this busy world, this consumption culture. To just slow down is like a peaceful act of rebellion. And I like being a rebel. So I think it's fun. I think you guys are rebels. I think Oak and Pine Girls are rebels.
We are.
Yeah. And I think we need to be. I think we'll cause that change just by being that, Yeah. So.
I love that. You have a presence about you. And I tell you this every time I see you, that I feel so calm around you. It's just a very calmness and it's so good. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I'm learning to take a compliment, so I'm just going to take that in and let that soak in. Yeah. I feel pretty calm, I would say. I have little jitters, here and there, but for the most part, I've learned to, I thank my daughter for that, actually. Yeah. My daughter's the reason why I learned to be aware of that jumpiness in me and that, and I didn't want her to experience that too much. Yeah. So I try to embody the calm. I'm not always, though. Ask my husband.
Oh, that's funny because the people around us sometimes, like when you said like your daughter, like my kids would be very brutally honest with me sometimes. Then same thing. Sometimes my husband, he gets like the opposite end of, Yeah. But thank you so much. Thank you for being here. If someone wants to work with you, follow you, or where, what's your website?
drmindfulmama.com or drmindfulmama on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
you for being here. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you on the next episode.